Next slide, please. Thank you. So the first step, writing your manuscript, you've finished all those important scientific experiments and you're ready to write it up to submit to a journal. So it's very important to remember what we call the ABC of effective writing: accuracy, brevity, and clarity. So in terms of accuracy, you'll need to clearly present your research, and your article should only be submitted when it's fully complete. We suggest reading the information in the manuscript submission guidelines and ensuring your paper is presented according to journal requirements, as these do change from journal to journal. In terms of brevity, when writing, it's a good idea to keep it simple and really get to the point quickly. A longer manuscript may not necessarily be better, as it may lose your reader's attention. For clarity, your paper will need to be well organised and clear to allow editors and peer reviewers to understand the paper well enough to evaluate the research within it. It's important that you have a clear message to show and to show how that the research is really important to your target audience. Next slide, please. So when thinking about which journal to submit to, you'll no doubt have usual journals that you use yourself and you read frequently. It's important to talk to your network, think about the audience that you're trying to reach. There are some journal selector tools that you can use to help you do this, which are, you put information in and they will suggest some journals that you could choose. You want to think specifically about the audience and how that fits with your article. For example, do you want to publish open access in a gold open access journal, which I'll talk about a bit later on? Or does your work suit a journal with a really broad scope that you want to reach across different disciplines, or maybe something a bit more specialised within your own field? Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So, as I said, journals typically have their own submission guidelines, which cover the format to submit your paper in and also what is required. It's really worth reading these through and making sure you have all the information in your submission, because if you don't, the manuscript may be sent back to you and the peer review may be delayed. And this can cover things like how to prepare your figures, what to include, such as cover letters, funder information, declaration of interests, and that sort of thing. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the title of your manuscript is really important, as they capture the attention of the editors and peer reviewers. It's important to keep it short and meaningful, and there is actually some research to indicate that a shorter title receives more citations, probably because it's easier to find. Also include with your submission 1 or 2 keywords, because once published, this will help more readers find your article through search engines such as Google. We've put an example there of where the first title in the top box is quite wordy, and you can actually just trim it down and make it more punchy and more interesting. Next slide, please. So all papers typically have an abstract, and these are visible to everyone, whether or not readers have subscriptions or not. So they should be clear and informative and really cover the main points of your paper. Again, it's worth checking your journal guidelines, because some journals will put limits on the number of words within abstracts. Think again about making it compatible for search engines. And in terms of discoverability, it's likely that readers will search for terms that are commonly used in your field. So try and include effective keywords. Usually there's an option to submit some keywords, but also include them within your abstract as well. Next slide, please. Thank you. Although the basis of peer review is the same across all journals, so it's experts within a field providing comments on a manuscript submitted to the journal, there are different types of peer review, and I've listed here some of the most common types. So single blind peer review is probably the most common, certainly within scientific research. So that's where reviewers are aware of the author's identities, but the authors are never informed of the reviewer's identity. Double blind peer review This is very common amongst social sciences and humanities, and that's where neither the author nor the reviewer is aware of each other's identities. And also open peer review, where authors and reviewers are both aware of the other's identities. And in this case, in some journals, the reviewer's reports are published alongside the article, so readers can view the reviewer's reports as well as the article itself. There also are some models around post-publication peer review. So this is in particular experimental open access publishers. Often the manuscript is posted before it's peer reviewed, and then people comment on it, and the reviews are often posted alongside the paper again. The type of peer review used by a journal is usually clearly stated within the policy pages on the journal website. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the assessment process for journal articles. So once you've finished your article, you've submitted it to your journal. The journal editor will then initially screen the article to decide whether it's suitable for the journal and should progress on to peer review. Sometimes at this stage, an article could be rejected, and that's called desk rejection. And that will usually be because it's out of scope for the journal or a reason like that. If it is successful, then the article will move on to be peer reviewed, and the editor will select some reviewers to provide comments on the manuscript. They'll then assess the reviews that are provided. At this stage, the article could be accepted, rejected, or most commonly sent back to author for revisions. Next slide, please. So when looking at the possible outcomes of the peer review, it's really unusual that a paper would just be published straight away without any changes at all. If it's not rejected at that stage, it's usually revisions are nearly always asked for. So they could be minor, such as language editing or adding in some references, or they could be more major, such as even additional experiments required. Next slide, please. As the author, the comments of the referees give you an opportunity to refine and improve the manuscript, and also to discuss the comments that you don't agree with, and that's perfectly fine to do. In writing your response, we suggest providing a cover letter which summarises the main changes that you've made, and also then a more detailed response line by line to the reviewer's comments, providing details of what you changed or why you didn't make any of the changes requested, if that's what's happened. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to move on to an overview of open access now. Next slide, please. So open access publishing is becoming increasingly important in academic research dissemination. In 2020, 36% of articles were published open access, and that is a 16% yearly growth since 2017. A lot of that increase has actually been driven by the COVID pandemic and a drive to make more research widely available. It's compared to a 1% growth over the same time period for non-open access articles. And it's predicted that by the end of next year, around 40%, 47%, so nearly half of all content will be published open access. Next slide, please. So this table shows you some of the different types of open access journals. Diamond open access journals, these are typically funded by a society, an institution, or a funder. So there's no author payment required, but the content is still freely available for everyone to read. Fully gold open access journals, so authors are usually required to pay an article processing charge or an APC, either individually or through their funder or institutional agreements. And then all the content then is freely available for readers. Hybrid journals have a mixture of subscription and open access content, with only the open access articles having an article processing charge. The open access content is then available for everyone to read, but the subscription content is usually behind a paywall, so people need to subscribe to read. There are journals which are non-open access or subscription journals. And there they have no open access content, so there are no APCs charged, but all the content is behind the paywalls, so people need to pay a subscription to read the journal. Importantly, you'll notice that each of these journals has the peer review content column ticked. So regardless of the journal model, peer review is an integral part of each of them. And the standard and quality of peer review should not vary regardless of the journal's OA status. Next slide, please. At Cambridge University Press, we now have 70 fully gold or diamond open access journals, along with 359 hybrid journals, which allow open access article publishing on an individual article basis within a subscription model. There are very few journals in our portfolio now that don't allow open access publishing in some form. We're also encouraging our hybrid journals to apply for transformative journal status as a route to compliance with Plan S. And we now have over 200 journals with such status. And this means that these journals are committed to the goal of transitioning to fully open access by gradually increasing their open access content. As we do this, we'll continue to reduce subscription prices for these journals as we have a double dipping policy and the amount of non-open access content falls. The bar chart there shows the proportion of open access articles within our journals. And as you can see, this has been increasing each year. And based on author patterns from the last few years, we estimate that about half of our research authors will choose open access this year. Next slide, please. This slide shows just a small selection of our fully gold open access journals, which you can see span a number of subject areas in the health and human sciences, microbiology, agriculture, engineering, environmental science, even history. The understanding of open access is growing in all communities, and funding pathways can be transferred from the so-called author pays APC model, the article processing charge model, to a library pays read and publish or transformative agreement model. And new disciplines can now enjoy significant benefits that open access can bring to their publications. Some of these journals were launched gold open access right from the beginning, and some of them have been converted from the subscription model when it became clear that there was enough community, library or funder support to make the change. Next slide, please. So publishing open access typically incurs an article processing charge, an APC, and this charge is usually paid by the author's funding body, or the author's institution. So increasingly, we're making agreements with institutions called transformative agreements, and you may have heard the term read and publish, and read and publish is a type of transformative agreement. So this means that authors at these institutions can publish open access in our journals without paying an APC, and readers can still access the subscription content that we publish. Importantly, full waivers or APC discounts are available in both gold open access and hybrid journals within our portfolio. And Andrew's going to talk a little bit more about our transformative agreements later. If you're not based at an institution that has a transformative agreement with us, we may have a discretionary waiver available for gold open access journals so that authors without access to funding can still publish in the journals. And these waivers and discounts don't apply to our hybrid journals because any author who's unable to pay an APC could still publish in those journals through the subscription route. Our ultimate goal in the transition to open access is to ensure that no one is prevented from publishing in our journals, no matter what the publication model. Next slide, please. So publishing in a gold open access journal, a journal that's entirely open access, is very straightforward. When publishing open access within a hybrid journal, the author has a choice to make. So the process is much the same as traditional publishing. All articles still go through the same peer review process and are then accepted or rejected by the editor. The key point for deciding on open access publication in Cambridge hybrid journals is when the article is accepted, and then you'll be asked to complete an author publishing agreement, which we call a license to publish, and select to publish open access at that stage, under a Creative Commons license. So that's a CC, and then there are various licenses within the Creative Commons family.